Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for Apple to go back into the standalone display business. They were in it before, and as you guys saw in my Mac Mini review, I still am enjoying my Apple Cinema display made from 2010, which I think has aged incredibly well. It still looks great, has decent brightness. It's a 1440p display, not as fancy as the giant 5K 27-inch displays, but honestly, with the average viewing distance, 1440p I think is plenty for most people. I also love the fact that it's one size bezel all the way around, and I can't help but hope that maybe if Apple came back to this game, they could do something truly unique and exciting. So today we're talking about my theories, my conspiracies on why Apple's about to refresh it, why it makes sense now, and why it didn't make sense earlier. And yeah, before you get too excited, it's gonna be expensive. So a lot of people couldn't help but notice that when unboxing the new Mac Mini, they had this example of a display in the paperwork. Now, I'm not the one to suggest that, oh, it's in the paperwork, so it's been confirmed. You know, I denied the Pixel Ultra when that first started coming around and said, hey guys, this isn't real. Turned out that's what happened. And I know this paperwork does not confirm anything, but it at least got me thinking. I looked at this picture that they included in the Mac Mini and said, you know what? While Apple sells their LG ultrafine displays, and I've looked at them myself, they are decent displays. You have to admit, they kind of look ugly. They kind of look stupid. The top bezel's thicker than the rest of the display. There's only Thunderbolt 3 ports. Don't expect any other port on the back, which is very much like Apple. And I understand Apple worked with LG on these displays, but from the back and the way they just kind of look on a desk, they look like standard like Optiplex Dell boring monitors. They don't look signature Apple. And John Morrison in our latest collaboration video actually had some good points as to why maybe Apple hasn't made a standalone display yet, and his biggest theory was, well, there's not really much to partner it with yet. They could just release a Thunderbolt 3 display with USB-C on the back and say, well, you can use it as an external monitor for your iMac. I guess that works. You can use it as an external monitor for your MacBook, but perhaps Apple was waiting to start making towers again, similar to the Mac Mini, so that they could advertise a specific monitor to be sold with their specific boxes. Now, I don't think that this standalone display is going to come out in 2018 like the Mac Mini did, which is why I think they're going to launch the new display alongside that mythical modular Mac Pro we keep hearing about. Likely to be released at WWDC 2019, though if it wanted to come out sooner, that would be great. Would not be opposed to that. I'm also at this point not opposed to website refreshes. If they just want to take the Apple Store down for a few hours, turn it back up, and here's the new display, I wouldn't mind that either. That would be great. That would save us a lot of time, and we could just get to making those videos about it and start reviewing it ourselves. But obviously, there's a lot that Apple has implemented with the new all-in-one iMac designs that they could implement in these new displays. Priority one being, okay, look, you brought this thin bezel curved corners display to the iPhones, okay? You brought it to then the Apple Watch, then you brought it to the iPad. You keep bringing it to all these different product lines. I think the next one that you need to bring this to is, that's right, your all-in-one designs. Bezels on MacBooks, obviously, they could get a lot thinner, that's for sure. No notches. Sorry, Renee Ritchie, I don't want a notch. But just for a second, imagine Apple-made display with a bezel as thin as it is on the current gen iPad Pros. And I'm not even saying you have to curve the corners a lot. Just make it really, really subtle. Maybe even curve the corners in software so that you can go into settings and turn off the curved corners if you'd like. The curved corners thing would just be simply to match the rest of the ecosystem if people want to. But if they just want their monitors to be square like any other monitor and how it is in that Mac Mini paperwork, that's also just fine. Just make it a software toggle or something like that. But if you look at Apple's current lineup of all-in-ones, these have entire computers housed in them, very, very powerful ones, and yet they're able to remain very, very thin, very, very slim, and sleek looking on your desk. Now, I just can't imagine how thin and how cool it would look if we just had the monitor and Apple didn't have to worry about stuffing an entire computer in there as well. I think they could make something truly special. So 5K display, obviously, one size bezel all the way around, maybe a tiny, tiny Apple etched logo at the very bottom, but again, as thin as the iPad Pro bezels. I would say go ahead and implement the iMac Pro 1080p webcam in there, as I use my iMac Pro webcam quite a bit when I do my gaming streams over on Tailosive Gaming. It's a decent webcam. It supports 60 frames a second. It is 1080p, and allowing people to access that by simply just buying an external monitor instead of having to spend $5,000 on an all-in-one iMac, I think would make a lot of people happy. Also, within the iMac Pro, there's really, really decent sounding speakers. I think you could also implement these speakers into the standalone iMac, and this would not be unheard of because the Apple Cinema display display, the Apple Thunderbolt display, whenever Apple made dedicated displays, typically they always had cameras in them, they always had a few extra ports that you could access, and they always had speakers implemented. So that's why I'm suggesting, of course, when they come back, they can bring all these things with them. Similar to the LG Ultrafine displays, probably have some Thunderbolt 3 ports on the back, as well as a port that allows charging to go to your MacBook Pro if you'd like, as well as 5K pass-through, which is unparalleled in the competition, and it's really, really cool to me that Apple is able to use so much power and so much data to go through one port on a MacBook. So obviously, bring that over to this display as well. And who knows, this is very unlike Apple, but this is my wish list video, so I can say whatever I want. The Mac Mini has an HDMI port on it, doesn't it? Why not throw an HDMI 2.0 on the display as well for maybe people who want to use this 5K display but don't necessarily have a Mac or don't necessarily want to pair it with something like a Mac Mini or the new Mac Pro. The newer Apple, when it comes to new computers, has been somewhat okay with having ports, at least in the desktop realm. So if this is a standalone monitor that's going to be used with other desktops, maybe Apple will be okay with having these extra ports. We'll see. What I also think would be great is if they finally allowed for different color options in this desktop department. So you can order this Thunderbolt display in silver or space gray if you like. I would say let's go crazy and throw in gold or something like that, but there's not really a Mac that would match that. I'm just saying, like, if someone wants to buy this external monitor for their iMac Pro, they can decide for it to match, or if they're buying this external monitor for the regular iMac, they can decide for the colors to match that way. So silver and space gray pretty much covers the Pro market, just like the new iPad Pros do. And similar to other Thunderbolt displays in the past, this could add a little bit of extra GPU. Yes, as weird as it sounds, my Apple Cinema display from 2010 actually has, very, very dated, but it has its own dedicated GPU in there so that when you're editing or when you plug your MacBook into this external display, you can get a little bit more processing power, a little bit more graphics to go along with it when you're working with this now desktop class display. Now, of course, when getting all of these things in one purchase, you can't expect it to be very cheap, especially given the LG Ultrafine displays are already pretty expensive, and that's an LG made monitor. If Apple's making this monitor, I anticipate it to cost somewhere between $1,200, $1,300, something insane like that, which is why I'm suggesting something that Apple hasn't really done in a long time. Make multiple size options for people who want to get a 4K display if they would like, and a 5K display, so that you can get the prices a little bit lower. So LG sells a 4K Ultrafine display, which is still really expensive, but not as bad. So Apple could mimic that display lineup by also having a 4K option that's more in the 22-inch display realm, and then of course the 5K option in the 27-inch realm. I think carrying around this monitor, it would be extremely light because there would not be much on the back, unlike iMacs do currently have. This 27-inch display would not take up as much space as they do on current desks, given iMacs have these very, very large bezels as it is. And I think before refreshing the iMac lineup entirely so that they have this bezel-less design trend, maybe implement Face ID in 2019. Before doing that, maybe experiment with it by just launching a standalone display to ship with the modular Mac Pros out there. And I think a lot of people would be excited to try this out. So that's essentially my pitch for the Apple standalone display. One little cherry on top is, what if they implemented Face ID to the Thunderbolt 3 display? That way, when you're using your Mac Mini or you're using your modular iMac, you'll be able to just turn on the display, it looks at you, and unlocks with your face. I don't know. A little crazy. I doubt Apple will actually do that. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, why not? You know, it's not something you move around, so they would only have to orient the sensors to be in one direction, unlike the iPad, where they have to implement them for all the different ways. So come on, Apple, you can make this work. We know you can do it. Let me know what you guys would love to see in an Apple Thunderbolt 3 display down in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I'll see you in the next one.